me first introduce myself. My name is Nievera. I'm with musicdirect, one of the sponsors of AXPONA, and it is my pleasure once again to be on this podium to be part of many of the great sessions that have been happening since this show came to Chicago. I continue to be very grateful to Steve Davis for him pulling me off of selling stuff on phones and meeting a lot of people to get a little relaxed time, but also to take on the challenge of meeting with so many great people during the course of AXPONA's run here in Chicago. I'm very pleased to be asked to be the moderator for this discussion of why you should give a FLAC. What do you really know about digital audio? And our friends at AXPONA have assembled three rather smart people to help us make this subject a bit more easier for all of us to understand. Heaven knows it's a very complex subject. Even I, as the analog expert from musicdirect, will oftentimes find myself wondering, what am I going to do to appreciate audio in the digital realm? So we have assembled these wonderful guys. From our my far right, Rafe Arnott got his start listening to music as a child thanks to his father's love of vinyl and big speakers. He was able to start that audiophile path in the last several years and hasn't looked back. A passion for music, high-end gear, vinyl records, and their ability to transport the listener through time to the jazz studios of the 50s and 60s is what helped drive his tube gear fetish and recent lust for large horn speakers. Akira Kurosawa films, 80s teen comedies, Two Crazy Children, crate digging, craft beer, and frequent road trips helps keep him sane. An award-winning photojournalist for almost 2 decades, Rafe is a full-time audio enthusiast and currently the editor-at-large for parttime.audiophile.com. Ken Christensen started his recording enterprise, Handmade Recordings, back in 1976. Since that time, he has been working on a number of great recordings in his long career, including many for the Name label record label, as well as his current deal with True Stereo Recordings. He is also the co-founder and partner of Pro Musica, a fantastic audio shop here in the Chicago area. And finally, to join our team here, Mark Feiner. He has been working with the Digital Entertainment Group since its inception as its senior director and plays a key role in driving their various technology platforms, including the Stream the Studio high-resolution music initiative. Mr. Feiner is also the founder and managing director of Communications Research, a strategic consulting group that provides marketing, communication support, and emerging entertainment products, content, and services. Our panel for today. Mark, let's start with you. For many listeners, digital audio is confusing. I know. I probably have about 10 different apps and streaming services that I have to fiddle around with, all with so many different levels of confusion and also entertainment. I think the question here is, how does a dedicated analog listener, as well as a digital devotee, make sense of the alphabet soup of formats and abbreviations?
Thanks, Bess. Well, the simple answer to that is you really don't. It's far too complicated for most people, even those totally immersed in the industry. So I think for some level setting purposes, at least as our approach is at the DEG, we like to minimize that amount of confusion and focus more on finding the right music solution for each of the market customers who are involved in this. And let me just digress for a moment, just for those of you who need to know what the DEG is. That's probably the biggest question in terms of formats and names and acronyms. We're an organization, as Bess referenced, we've been around for over 20 years. We're the marketing side of the technology curve. Our goal is to herd the cats and try to bring some alignment on the key technology initiatives that affect entertainment. We work with over 80 member companies, every household name in the studio, music, consumer electronics, and tech side of the industry. And hopefully, if we do our job well, working with all of our partners on the production side, the distribution side, and editorial and press, we provide some direction on some of these answers. To your question, we think the most important issue is to try to go beyond the question of formats. And the reason why is pretty simple. In the digital space in particular, what used to be pretty intimidating as to what codec, what file format, what type of digital processing you utilized in your playback environment, from a consumer standpoint, it's pretty much minimized today. Most of the electronics is much more sophisticated than it used to be. Most of the devices can play virtually any file format or digital encoding and playback system. And we think now the time is right to take consumers to the next level and try to get to the heart of how they get their music content. Because that's really what's changed. In the last 15 years, we've gone from physical to digital, and now with more physical and digital options than ever before, that's the key question. And that's what we try to focus on. To Bess's point about our current initiative, Stream the Studio, what it's designed to do is very simple. We're trying to take the emerging way that music and movie and television and gaming enthusiasts are getting their content, which is over-the-top streaming, and marry that with how music at its highest level is produced by people like you in the studio. That's where high res is concentrated at, and if we can simplify that message, that you can stream your favorite artist and band at the highest quality possible, and do that in sync with all the new services and devices that are coming online, we think that'll go a long way to minimizing the confusion.
Let me extend the question then to
Sure.
our good friends Ken and Rafe. Rafe, of course, you've been reporting about it recently for parttimeaudiophile.com, and Ken Christensen, of course, is a recording engineer. Our friends out here in the audience here, like myself, want to be able to say, I like it, but what the hell do I do? Where do I begin? What makes it, a kind of an enjoyable sense? So is there a better way to deal with the alphabet soup, just as Mr. Feiner has indicated with his initiatives?
Well, hello? Can you hear me?
One moment.
Is there a switch on this?
I think there is. Hang on.
See, I'm an engineer. I don't know how to use a microphone.
Let me call housekeeping. Hang on here.
The ultimate indignity. Use my mic.
Hello? Oh, hi. Ken Christensen here. I'm recording tonight, actually. I'm not going to get any sleep over this weekend. But for me, honestly, the whole digital thing, I'm kind of amazed that I'm actually sitting here and talking about this, because just a few years ago, I was probably the most anti-digital person you could ever meet. And the reason I say that is because I tried so many different digital formats, computers and Nagra Ds and all kinds of different things, and I just rejected them all. They just didn't take me anywhere, because for me it was all about how far music takes me. And I feel the same way. I'm always going to feel that way. The only thing that really matters is, does it get you involved? Does it actually make you want to be involved, for me, in the creative process of making music? And I can just tell you a little story. I've recorded with analog machines. I started with Studer Revox machines in the 70s and in the early 80s, and then I heard a Nagra 4S that a friend of mine who works at Saturday Audio Exchange, Carl Beitler, my mentor, played for me in my house, and I put on one of my 10-inch reels. I had to cut it down to 7-inch because it didn't fit on his machine, and my mouth dropped, and I said, oh my God, this sounds unbelievable. And I was just getting started learning. Actually, Carl helped me in a lot of ways, figuring out how to use microphones. And I just love music. The only reason I got involved in recording, to be honest with you, is because I love music. And I was a person who couldn't play what I felt studying music. So I thought, what can I do? I can get involved in other ways. So recording music was for me a way to do that. And once I got that machine and a good pair of microphones, which I already bought, I had a pair of 414s I bought in 1978, I felt very comfortable. I'm still using that pair of microphones I bought at 23 years old. And I'm not obsessed with equipment. It's never been that important to me, even though I own an audio store and I sell equipment. It's really always been the means to an end. How far does it take me into the music? And so the reason I mentioned the whole digital thing is because I never thought that it was going to get there. And then I bought a Nagra 6 in 2008. The name label, who was very nice to me, and I did a bunch of records for them and just had an enormous amount of fun, still do some stuff for them, said they wanted to start a download site and do high-res digital. So I said, okay. Let me see what I can do. So I was just starting to dabble. This is around 2007. And I had a computer, and I had an interface, and I listened to it, and I go, this doesn't sound as good as what I was doing with the CDs, you know. And then I got the Nagra 6, and I started recording with it. I recorded some samples, and I go, this is pretty good. I went to the Green Mill, which I'm going to tonight, and I made a recording there, and that was July of 2008. I have not made an analog recording since then. I have transferred many of my tapes, but I basically said I do not need to do analog recording anymore. Not that I don't love analog recording, and I won't argue with anybody because anybody can have any opinion they want. But for me, it got to the level that I could get the nuance and the quality of art that I wanted to communicate to myself and to anyone else that wanted to listen to the things that I did. So to me, it's just a storage medium. And in the end, it's all about the music. So now I've had my Nagra 6. I've recorded 7,800 of my own 14,000 LP collection. I have many people bringing me LPs that want to record them, and I don't even charge money. I just say, it's not in my collection, so I'll add it so I can listen to it, you know, and I love music, so it's just a great way to do it. And in the same time that I'm doing all that, I'm recording music at Pro Music. I'm recording different concert series. I'm still actively involved in producing music and being involved in the art form of it. I've been teaching at Columbia College now since 2000. I think there's a few of my students actually here that were in my classes, and I love doing that because I have a chance to talk about some of the things I've done in my life, and I learn from them as well. You know, they can teach me some of the current things that are going on.
Do you have a sense of what it's like in terms of working in those formats? Do you feel one is better than the other in terms of what you're doing?
I mean, I work in the PCM world because that's what the Nagra is, and I have investigated. I've listened to a number of different DSD and FLAC and Wave, and I have my own opinions about them, but I'm not going to say they're conclusive because, you know, I try to observe things and base my decisions based on observations. The Nagra 6 has been the reference device that I found to record digital with. I've never found a computer that actually played music for me. As a matter of fact, I just did a class with my students on Tuesday morning about analog versus digital. And this is kind of an interesting thing. And I showed them how I could do all these different things with my computer. I started out with a very basic, just a optical out from my computer. And then I went to a USB interface. And then I went to a FireWire interface, which I bought this Weiss device for a couple of grand, little silver box. People, how could you spend that much money on that? And it only gives me a digital out. And I run it into my fancy name DAC or whatever, and it makes a better sound than I heard from the other thing. But then I took the same music on a USB stick, I stuck it into a name NDS, and it made the computer sound like noise. And then I played it on the server, and it was much better. And now there's this, you know, it's evolving. It's getting better and better. And I feel now digital has gotten to the level that I never thought it would get to. And I thoroughly enjoy it. You know, I make no bones about it. You know, I own all those records. I don't play vinyl. I actually record it and I listen to it. Because the little dirty little secret about vinyl is that people don't know is basically a tone arm is a microphone, a cartridge is a microphone. So if you're playing your vinyl and you're not using headphones or you have it in another room, you've got so much phase distortion that you wouldn't believe what's going on there. So when I record the vinyl, there's no speakers playing. So I've done these tests. I had the Chicago Audio Society at Pro Musica, 60 people in my room. I said, I prefer streaming my records than playing the record in the room, and they didn't believe me. And I played the record, 1985 Lynn Sondic, very nice sounding turntable, and then I played the streaming thing, done from the same thing, and they all heard the same thing. Much better from the streaming thing. Not that the streaming thing ultimately, because how can it be better? It's recording that medium, but it's just the device and the way it's been used. The speaker was making sound, and it was causing vibrations, and as we all know, sound travels at the speed of about 1,130 feet per second, which means it's not in real time. It's actually a millisecond delay, and that causes those distortions. So, is it important? You know, if you're just listening to music, it's not. But if you're somebody who's a fanatic like me who likes to hear every little bit of that's going on in the music, it gets distracting, you know? And so my theory is just listen and hear as much as you can and enjoy it. So.
Rafe, you want to chime in?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Who here has their audio set up as streaming computer files? Raise your hand. Who here is listening to CDs? Who here is listening to analog?
Pretty agnostic.
Who thinks streaming is better than CDs? Who thinks CDs are better than streaming? Who thinks analog's better than any digital format? Bess mentioned it's an alphabet soup. It is an alphabet soup. And why should we care? It's all about convenience. How convenient do you want your music? Do you want to be able to listen to it all the time with the touch of a button on your phone? That's great. Will you get as good a quality? Yeah, you will. As good a quality as, let's say, a high-end analog system? Yeah, you will, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to do that. It's not going to be cheap. It's like anything that's super high quality, you're going to pay for it. Doesn't matter whether it's a watch. Doesn't matter whether it's a car. You're going to pay for what you get. You can get convenient digital computer audio for cheap, but it's not going to sound nearly as good as it could if you spent more money. Formats, personally, I'm completely agnostic when it comes to formats. I don't care if I listen to PCM encoded files, whether it's a DSD. I like MQA. You can set me on fire later. I love tape. I love listening to records. I think it just boils down to what is the best medium for you. And once you decide that, it's just basically trying to find somebody that has some knowledge about it that you can talk to that's going to put you on the right path. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in this industry, in this hobby, is that we start pursuing something with a whole bunch of vim and vigor because we're really excited about it and we think it's going to be great. And we end up spending a shit ton of money and a shit ton of our time going down a rabbit hole and realizing, oh man, I completely did the wrong thing. I made the wrong choice. This isn't what I really needed. I should have done this. I should have done that. You're going to save yourself a ton of time and money just by finding somebody who knows what they're talking about. So go to your local record shops, go to your bricks and mortar, talk on forums if you can, although forums I think are completely nuts online, so be wary there. But just find people that are knowledgeable and do your best to interpret and understand what it is they can pass on to you.
I think it's great that everyone answered the poll by Rafe. I think that is telling as to how we're going to move forward and helping you understand what's going on this subject. Well, let's say that you're being asked by, and I'll open this up to all three of you. Let's imagine that you're asked by a listener who is curious about what high-resolution digital can do. They have a computer, but don't have anything else outside of the dedicated stereo. If you could, what basics would you recommend they get and why?
You guys are looking at me.
No, we're...
So-
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to comment. I think Rafe's point before leads to that answer. What people do to access and enjoy music is a lifestyle decision. It's based on your approach that fits your lifestyle need. All these changes we're discussing are business model transitions, are technology evolutions, and each one of them has a valid case point depending on how you access and use your music. So in the case that Bess just referenced on a PC, all these devices are gateways. A PC allows you to take, in some cases still even physical media, but more often than not digital delivery, and depending on what type of accessory you use to access the content that's delivered on that PC, something simple like a USB drive that's able to convert files will allow you to enjoy that experience in a mobile environment with your great quality headphones in ways you could never imagine 10 years before. That's one of the key changes in the marketplace that has been brought about by the digital evolution. The other key aspect of this is that there's a myth, with all due respect to my colleague who's a member of the media, that the industry perpetrates and continually talks about from the press and analyst standpoint that there's one type of music customer, and that's not the case either. Even in the digital space, there are multiple segments of music buyers who look at music in different ways. Some use music in the background of their lifestyles, whether they're working out, traveling, whatever the case may be. Others, though, particularly younger fans, are just as passionate about music as the dyed-in-the-wool boomers such as myself who grew up on physical media, whether it be vinyl or CDs. And it's taking that audience, combined with the tech and enthusiast market that exists today with the older audience, and finding the valid case for high-res audio, to your point. What does this mean? In simple language, there's an opportunity to provide a studio quality experience to bring the listener as close as possible to the producer and engineer and the artist and band who created that music. And these devices are all just gateways to get to that experience.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, totally valid points completely. It's just another method to be able to access music and enjoy it. And you can do it for very cheaply now. And there's several companies that make thumb-sized USB attachments you can put directly out of your computer that's going to give you fantastic sound quality that just a few years ago would have been thought completely impossible.
Yeah, if you just expand upon it, from USB drives and smartphones by the millions, which can support high res and more are coming, to core AV component equipment, your AV receiver, a DAC in the home, or even now car products that are coming in the mobile environment that can support high res files along with other types of distributed content. All of these are designed to fit the needs of the customer. So our goal is to make the message about this as much fun, as exciting as possible, and most importantly, I'm speaking for my colleagues in our association, get more content out to people like yourselves, particularly in the digital space, because that's what drives these formats being adopted. It's all about the content.
Thank you. I suppose the next question, well, actually, you know what, I'm going to throw this to Rafe, because you chose to step into the MQA pool for about 3.2 seconds. Riffing on that theme, is it safe to say that that streaming quality can be on par with traditional playback systems? I mean, like a, you know, dare I say it, like a turntable or a CD player? It's been so talked up, it's been so hyped up, and now that it's here, it's like almost like still like the jury is out on that question.
Just specifically on MQA?
Yeah.
I've heard it. I like it even just with first, not even unfolded. If you've listened to MQA on Tidal without it being even unfolded, it sounds different. There's a difference in the way it's mastered. Is it better? There are some things I enjoyed about it better. It's a different type of mastering. I think you can notice it. As you step in further with software unfolding and then the hardware unfolding to get the full lossless data pack out of it. I personally, I like the sound. I mean, to me, it's just another way to listen to music, though. I mean, I don't understand really why so many people are getting so worked up. I get that some people look at it as a way to lock in people to buy hardware to go with the software, but no one's forcing you to do that. You can still play MQA files on something that's not MQA certified to unfold it. It's not going to sound the same, but you're still going to be able to hear the file.
Cool.
I'm totally ignorant of MQA other than reading a few articles about it, but and I don't, you know, all these formats that are available, I've, you know, experimented with a number of them. Honestly, like I always look at all these things as storage mediums, and what is it you're going to get out of it? I mean, you could look at a record, you could look at a master tape, you could look at a CD, and they all have different qualities of sound associated with them. You know, we all form our prejudices, especially if you're someone who's like me, who's actually creating content. And that's pretty much what I do, is record music. And not just live artists, which I do love doing, and that has dictated many of the things that I've done in my life in terms of how I've approached, you know, different formats, so to speak. I started out recording, fooling around with cassette decks, and then I got a reel-to-reel. I said, oh, wow, that sounds really great. And then I got a pair of quad electrostatics, which, according to our friend here, is all mid-range. I don't agree. It's still my favorite speaker, I'm sorry. Because it sounds more like a microphone. And when I got those, it made me say, I was experimenting with different ways of recording music, and I started doing stereo recordings. And They spoke to me instantly. And so I've actually spent my life really trying to figure out how to get sound into 2 microphones and out the other end with as little intrusion as possible to get the maximum amount of musical information that an artist can give me. And actually, in my opinion, I want to be subservient to the music. I would rather, the best compliment I ever get when I work with a group is that they actually think I'm part of the band, that I've actually contributed enough to get their message out that they give me that and I've had it happen a few times, which is very nice. But I think I have an advantage because the simplicity of playback to me is a great thing. And so breaking it down, again, looking at it from the recording standpoint, just using a pair of microphones and understanding a little bit about acoustics and how to position instruments and such, you have just such an inherent advantage in getting the actual sound of music. I break sound down in 3 elements: frequency, amplitude, and time. And the closer you can recreate those associations, the more you can actually hear what's going on in the waveform. So as simple as I can put it, when I do what I do, it's to try to get that information. But on the other hand, I'm a listener, and I own a lot of musical content. And I say, how many of those recordings do I own are actually recorded with a stereo pair of microphones?
Just
0.1%?
sorry.
No.
Just to get back to MQA for a second, it's just, who here has an MQA-enabled DAC? Can I ask you why?
Well, when I bought it, it wasn't. There's the Meridian Explorer 2.
So you got the upgrade.
So, yeah, so I figured, okay, it's coming, so I'll buy something that'll take it, so I bought it.
Right.
I do not have any MQA.
You haven't listened to any MQA music on it yet?
No.
Who's the other person who raised their hand who's got an MQA DAC?
You haven't explained what MQA is.
Oh, okay. MQA is a type of codec, basically. It's a math formula that Meridian, I think, originally developed it, but now it's just MQA. It's not even Meridian.
It's a technology that consists of a number of sophisticated filtering and data packing technologies that are applied in one of 2 different ways. One can be done, as Rafe described, as an end-to-end solution, where you can actually record and mix and master to this new platform. But a more practical consideration, where I think there is great promise for this and similar technologies, it's a very efficient way of taking a big high-res file and delivering it in a small container, such as on a mobile network to a smartphone, and getting on the unpacking or the reconstructed signal almost the same quality as the original master. So in that sense, it's a deliverable format, much as a WAV file or a FLAC file is from a standpoint of a consumer listening experience. And that's what's being discussed and apparently very hotly debated now within the industry from a standpoint of the sound quality and the other characteristics associated with it.
It's really, a lot of the things that they refer to a lot when they're talking about MQA is the timing and smearing.
Filters, yeah.
In the filtering. A lot of the information that they take is actually below the noise floor, and they're folding that in to the data. So it's almost about what you're not hearing in some senses. I've heard fully unfolded MQA files. I think they sound fantastic. It's interesting just, how many people here know what MQA is? Okay, so most of you are familiar with it. Okay. Yeah, I think it's another format. It's just interesting to see how much buzz has come around it. A lot of it seems to be around digital rights management, the fact that there's a buy-in, I guess, with the hardware, but.
There's a whole series of discussions regarding the licensing of technology in every case on every platform. So to be fair to MQA, it's just another example of this. And people have different points of view on this. But for all of you in the audience, this should not be new ground. I think you've lived through everything from Dolby and DTS issues to virtually every other license condition going back to the CD and perhaps even before. Even the 45 and the 33 RPM recording was a licensing issue at one point in time, many, many years ago. So,
I think for me, as a person who's been trying to get a digital setup for myself, is the fact that I've had to look at hard drives, USB sticks, and it's just driving me nuts. At one point, I was an Apple Music person, and the minute they changed the software, my hard drive just said, "I don't know this. It's a mess. I have no idea." So I guess my question here is, when you are starting to collect and harvest music as you see it, how important now is storage in this day and age? And is it something that's effective for everyone here?
I'll start with that, and I'll turn it over to you guys. I think one of the big changes in our market, which really, if you think about it, accounts for where we've come in terms of heavily or lossy compressed files in the MP3 era to today, is everything has changed regarding storage and processing speed and pipe. In the late 90s, we didn't have a lot of that available. And the technology has improved so much, and the ways to deliver this are so much more efficient, that now storage is so accessible to most people, they don't think twice about it. Not just in terms of the quantity of storage, but the methodology of storage. I think you referenced earlier about hard drives and various forms of solid state storage and what they've done to the reliability factor in some of the decisions you faced, Bess, when you talk about storage. So in essence, we look at these factors and we look at the complexity that's associated with traditional computer audio, and one of the things that's improving rapidly and still has a long way to go is people's ways of accessing and storing and managing all of this digital audio data. But make no mistake about it, it's getting better and will continue to improve as more people who are comfortable with the technology get involved with enhancing it.
How many people are completely driven batshit crazy by their computers trying to deal with organizing files? Thank you for being honest. I mean, I've been dealing with computers and software and stuff for many number of years. I was an IT manager for a while. So, I mean, I'm somebody that's actually coming from a background who knows how to deal with it. And it drives me crazy. I can't even imagine. Like, my poor father is on the phone with me every other week ever since he decided to get a laptop and use digital files. I don't understand. Should I restart it? It's just like, I just keep telling him, is there anything wrong with your CD player? And he's like, no. I'm like, does it sound good? Do you like it? Yeah, I love it. That's why I bought it. I said, well, then just stop making yourself crazy. And secondly, stop driving me nuts. And just be happy with your CD player.
That's the bigger issue. He's driving you nuts with this.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as digital audio goes, anything, like I've come to that only in the last couple of years with any sort of real verve or interest, because I'm a real analog guy. But I've approached it from the cheapest standpoint possible. I just bought myself a used MacBook Mini, the small 11-inch one, for like $450 on Craigslist. I bought a 2 terabyte hard drive from Best Buy for $100, and I got a Tidal subscription, and I use Rune. And I put it all together. It took me maybe 10 minutes to hook up the hard drive, format it, and then launch the software, and it just worked. So, I mean, it's great, and it was a very minimal investment to get into it. I know a lot of people who, the first thing they want to do is go and buy a specially modified computer that's basically a Windows box, but they'll pay $16,000 for it because it's got an aluminum enclosure or something like that. Then they have to get $20,000 worth of NAS with special high-speed drives and fiber optic cable in between and stuff. It's just like, I'll be damned if I can hear the difference. I spent a few $100.
But I would submit to your question before to the audience of those who are having problems with your computers always crashing and revising them for new software upgrades, et cetera. It's directly proportional to your comfort level, your experience, and the age demographic of the people we're talking to in the audience. So I'll throw one question out of the younger music fans in the audience. How many of you are fairly comfortable in working with your various computers and connected devices? That's the difference. And this is the
Yeah.
Of course, and there will continue to be. And to Bess's point before, there are different philosophies based on different platforms, particularly Mac and Windows. Once Apple gets you, Apple has you. And there's a frustrating aspect to that if you want to have an Apple-like experience. versus a more, we'll call it open platform, like Windows or Android or whatever the device we're talking about. But it's also lifestyle driven, it's demographic driven, it's generationally driven. And this is what we have to look at our industry at. We're in the context of all of that. That's why music keeps evolving and the options are so important.
I think he has a question for you.
Yes?
Actually, if I may,
Sure.
point. The number one reason why people have issues with streaming audio on computers is they're taking a general purpose computing device and trying to do one thing, whether or not they have the skill set for how that general purpose device works. If you have a problem by a dedicated music player, it will give you all the functionality, probably more, and easier to use, plug it into your receiver, and have it go at it.
It's a great point, and we see that same situation occur with every other multifunctional digital device today. How many people who use their smartphones for digital imaging and photography have the same ease of use issues as people with a dedicated point and shoot or digital SLR camera? It's the same thing. We trade off convenience and the amount of devices we carry and the unique nature of a solely focused device for that type of flexibility, but there's a price to pay for it as well. Absolutely. I guess we're into your moderator.
Yeah, hello. Let's break for commercial. I think at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to walk out into the audience here, and we're going to, talk to people. Pardon me, you have lovely feet.
He does this very well, by the
Yeah,
way.
so-
I've seen the other sessions. He's great at this.
Yeah, so if you have a question, I'll just ask for your name, where you're from, and your question.
Marty from the Arlington Heights area. It's actually for Bark, you're in the middle?
Ken.
Ken in the middle. We have this, actually, I do recording in the studio, and I live in an apartment that has a full 48-track digital system. So I've recorded about 4 or 5 bands in the past year. And one of the things that when I'm getting ready this summer, we're going to actually start mastering and doing some records for them. Because it's all digital, I guess my question to you would be like the formats, because we're using Pro Tools Pro 12 on it with a Tascam board. It's all got the fiber optics and all that cross connectivity. Okay. So I guess question is, like, in saving the audio, it's on an Apple-based Mac program. Like, what would you recommend for, like, say, storing it in, like, the formats for, reproduction?
Well, I mean, I've always believed you store information at the native, the way you record something, you store it at the native format that it's at. So if you recorded it at high res, 2496, 24192, or DSD, or whatever the format is, I don't like to change formats. I don't like to upsample or downsample. A good example is some production I've done. A gentleman who teaches at Columbia, we were having a discussion, and I asked him, he records bands and he works in studios. I'm not a studio guy. I record live. I go into the world and do things. But I said, Nick, what format do you use? I use 2444. I said, why do you do that? There's high-res stuff. He said, well, the problem is that if you do high-res and I'm making CDs and I down-convert it, it screws up the sound. And he turned me on to some articles that showed me, and I read about them, how they're the algorithms and all this and that. You can't really down-convert or up-convert and not have all these math issues with the math.
Yeah,
so I started thinking about that, and I said, well, I got into this, I got this Nagra 6, and I would never record it at 16-bit. To me, it's just, or 44 samples. When I got the Nagra and I started recording at 2496, I heard an enormous difference in terms of what I was hearing with digital recording before when I was working with CDRs. A lot of it could be the A to D conversion. Who knows? I'm not a scientist for that. But it was very interesting because I said, I'm still producing some CDs for some musicians. So how can I, take my high-res files I'm recording with and make sure they're getting the best CD? And so I tried a bunch of different things. I took the high-res files, I tried to do it to analog tape. No, just didn't work. It lost way too much information. And then I said, what else can I do? Well, I'm prejudiced when it comes to, I'm an audio dealer, so I have my own prejudice in playback of audio. And I think I found a system to me that is just surpassed everything else I've ever heard. I don't really want to talk about it because I'm not here to sell equipment. I'm here to talk about high-res digital. But what I found was the best way to do it was to actually take the high-res file and run it through this system that I use to play back digital and re-record it into my Niagara Digital at 1644. And then I compared it to when I tried down converting in WaveLab, which is what I use for my mastering program. And lo and behold, it was far, far closer to the original high-res file. And to me, the high-res thing at that point, it's not even so much the high-res as the way you work with the material. In other words, how you transfer the tape. It's very, very, there's many different ways of looking at it. When I first started doing high-res transfer from analog tape, for example, this is kind of a funny story. I'll try to tell it quickly. And I was doing this for name. I went to a friend of mine. He had a $30,000 Sadie A to D system with a Drake A to D converter. 60 grand worth of equipment. I took my Niagara 4S, took the tapes, ran it into his machine, came back to the store, played it through my computer on a TC interface. I listened to it, I said, this doesn't sound really any better than the CDR I got from Name. I got a CDR machine back in '92. It was a Philips machine. The CDs back then were $23 a piece. The machine was 15 grand. I used it till 2008 to transfer analog to digital. Worked great, sounded fine, until I got the Niagara 6, which changed the whole thing. But the funny thing is, I bought a Zoom H2, $179. Got it like 2 days after I did this. And I realized one of the things that I didn't do when I transferred the tape was I didn't run it through a proper buffer. Because a lot of the way you do information is how you transfer the data. So from analog, you need to buffer it properly. So a preamp stage is really important. I just bought a 90 gram preamp to transfer my analog tape and records because I heard a difference, and I'm that fanatical to do it. And it made enough difference where I can hear the benefit of that. I wouldn't suggest that for most people, by the way.
That's just another question.
Were you going to say something?
No, I thought he was.
I was just going to bring this gentleman here. Your name and your question.
Joel Alperson, Omaha. It's not a question, really. I want to advocate for a slightly different position.
Sure.
As somebody who's done a lot of stuff as a non-professional with computers, I want to advocate for trying out solid-state drives versus hard drives, linear power supplies for solid-state drives, for computers, SATA cables. The beautiful part about all this is, at least in my experience and the experience of many other hobbyists like me, it makes a difference. And the other cool aspect of it is, for an industry that's continually losing the younger generation, this is an opportunity to bring the hobby back to the hobby. You know, so often we buy a box and we set it down and we listen to it, and part of the fun is actually tinkering, experimenting, playing, and getting better sound. And yes, are there times when something goes wrong and I'm tearing my hair out? Sure. But it's well worth it because I have a far better system and a far more enjoyable experience as a result of my experimentation. And I actually even learned things. I learned science, psychoacoustics, things of that sort through the process. So I'd like to advocate for a little experimentation and a little trouble caused at home by investing in this extra effort, because I think the benefits are paid off in various ways.
Comments?
There's a gentleman that I know, he runs an audio company. I had an interesting conversation with him, and one of the things that he said to me that resonated with me recently was he felt that for the most part, music just seemed to get in the way of gear for most manufacturers and hobbyists. A lot of hobbyists don't seem to really care about music anymore. They seem to care about the boxes more and more and more. And I just think the less you have to screw around with any hardware or gear, the more time you're going to have to listen to music. And I mean, the only reason I even got into this is because I love music, and I just wanted my music to sound better than what I had at the time. And as we all know, what happens is it starts to get better, and then it gets better, and it gets better, and we talk less and less to our wives or our significant others. It's just keep it about the music. Worry less about the boxes and how you're listening to it. Just as long as you're happy with the sound, I think that's the main thing.
I do side with Mr. Alperson here for just a little bit, in the sense that music is extremely important, but I also know that the delivery of that content is important. In my world at Music Direct and with my colleagues that we work with, we're always advocating, educating constantly being sure that we stay on top of the game as well. But at the same token, I'm kind of in Rafe's position as well. Less is more when it comes to having the type of equipment that you'd like to have. And to Mr. Finer's statement earlier about the fact that everybody is getting in on the game and trying to make sense of what works, what doesn't work because of a question of lifestyle, that also plays well into our conversations with our customers as well. Anybody else with questions? Yes, either. I'm going to jump right over here. In fact, I'm going to hand the mic over to him for a few seconds. Keep it simple. First name and city, and what's your question?
Hello, my name is Mike. I'm about 3 hours north of here, Appleton. Thank you for the tidbits of information, and I'd like to elaborate on it a little bit. My goal is to create a jukebox. I have 1,000 CDs or so, and you said that I need a laptop, like a Mac, or perhaps something else. That's fine. You recommended a 2 terabit hard drive. I've been told that for 1,000 CDs I need about a full terabit. So having 2 terabits seems like a reasonable size and to allow me to expand my collection. Thank you. What I'd like to be able to do is have instant access to songs from my home stereo, but I'd also like to have a secondary file, perhaps in a compressed format for listening into a car or something where that's non-critical listening. What software do I need so that I can have the full uncompressed file? And should that be a WAV file or something called an AIFF or Elemental P or something like that? And lastly, you mentioned something about Ruin. I'm not sure what Ruin is, if you could explain that. But please help me set up a video jukebox, or I'm sorry, an audio jukebox.
Great question. Gentlemen?
Why do you want to rip your CDs?
I want instant access from one song to another.
Have you heard of Tidal? Tidal costs $20 a month for CD lossless quality streaming, and you've got access to 25 million files. There's not one album I've tried to stump Tidal with that it hasn't had. How long is it going to take you to do 1,000 CDs to rip that?
I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I haven't found one thing I wanted to hear on Tidal.
25 million
I won't
files.
say that, but every obscure record I wanted to hear, I can't find on Tidal. No ECM.
If there's something that you've got that just can't be found anywhere else, but it's free to sign up for it. All you need is a laptop or a phone. You can sign up and listen to it. You can get MQA quality through the app on your desktop with it if you want. Try it for a month and see if you pull out a CD again.
I'm going to slightly defend your question a little bit, only because I've had that situation where I have a 1 terabyte drive, and earlier we talked about when I was working with my Apple Music programming. What's difficult about trying to do something like that is the way that that software will work into your life. If that program is chock full of strange little ways to sit there and do segmentation of songs and so forth, and then there's the business of the metadata, in which it takes all that information of the song, goes into this little churn and says, oh, that's Barry White from 1976. It'll show up on your screen. But what if you find out it's not that when you're trying to do your jukeboxing? That's one of the challenges that I've had to face in trying to figure out software types of stuff like that. It also goes to the subject about Amara and various other secondary programs that are out there as well. Mark, chime in.
So I think the message is, while noble in intent, the complexity and the variables involved in everything from not just searching, discovering, and managing all the software, but all the integration you have to do to define a playback environment that meets your needs, it's probably more complicated in most cases than it's worth. Not that the sound quality issue isn't paramount, but just the metadata issue alone is complicated, because most of that has already been done for you on a service platform like Tidal or others, or even, as you know from your earlier CDs, it's been done in the replication and authoring process for the disk. So it all has to be taken into account before you do that.
This isn't to say that that's, your goal of being able to do a jukebox is a bad thing. In fact, I endorse it. I think it's wonderful. everyone here are doing it with,
Sure.
with Tidal as well. You're doing your own private playlists or things that'll work out, the barbecue mix or something like that. But it is still a little bit of an emerging question, because you're kind of in the game now, but the whole soup has become bigger than what it was before when this whole business started out. I mean, I don't see any reason why Tidal is a bad idea. I agree with Rafe in regards to that. It's
Give it a shot.
Just give it a shot.
I'm not saying what you're planning on doing is not cool. It is cool. I'm just looking at it strictly from like, how much time have you got, and do you want to be able to listen to music or sit there and rip and put in metadata?
And also the type of file types. Earlier you mentioned MP3 and various other things. There's only so much that you can do with that. And then the nightmare begins of the sound quality. If you're going to play that just for the purpose of going, hey, it's great, and you're saving space, only to find out that your sound quality is completely corrupted, you're back to basics. And I think that's really good.
Right.
I hear you. Anybody else? Yes. You're very vocal. I like that. Go ahead with your name and city and question, please.
My name is Raj. I'm from Plainfield, Illinois. I have a question, and I'm going to qualify it by pre-stating that I am not trying to say that anybody is wrong or right. I am literally curious, and I want to learn. Given that anything from CDO spec digital files and up from a resolution perspective can be converted back to the exact analog waveform that was originally digitized using good digital to analog converters, and there's studies out there. But
It can't.
okay,
Next
well,
question.
It's a sample of a waveform. You can't put it back to its original waveform.
obviously this is not the forum to do that. We should probably talk about it outside later. But there are several experiments out there on an oscilloscope where a waveform has been put in there, and then the inverse has been put in there, and you've got a flat line, which is exact ditto information, 100%. So that's why I was going. But clearly, I need to research that more, I guess.
Anyone else? Yes. I'm losing weight doing this. Your name and city and question.
So I'm Doug, I'm from Madison, and I have two questions, really. So you talked about this thing called Roon. You've been asked about it before.
Roon.
Roon?
R-O-O-N.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a software platform that'll help categorize or catalog and present music to you.
And it's in the Apple
You know
world,
what?
as I
No.
understand it.
No,
That's
it's
a good question.
completely
I don't
platform
think-
agnostic.
Agnostic, okay. That was going to be my question for Android, Windows, et cetera. The second part of my question, and I think some of us are trying to get on the right track, not with regard to music we already have, but it's more in the context of purchasing new music. And to me specifically, I'm interested in 5.1 hybrid CD, SACD, as the format, DSD stuff.
For surround.
Yeah, it's for surround. So is that available within some streaming environment that I know of?
That's a very good question.
Yeah,
I don't
very
know.
little of it right now from a standpoint of whatever source, whether it was PCM-based or DSD-based. And there's a reason why,
Yeah.
because the whole concept of surround music, while popular with some, is very challenging for others.
Right, I understand, and that's a matter of
I'll
opinion.
defer to my colleague on the recording and production side, what his point of view is on that.
5.1, I think people should listen to what they want to listen to. I wouldn't waste my time with
Yeah, I hear you.
You know,
I can tell you of recordings that I've heard that are absolutely spectacular. I mean, Acoustic Sounds being
well, no, I'm not saying you
company
can't
that
make
spent a
good
lot.
sound out of it. What I'm saying is, how much content is there for it, first of all?
Yeah,
like you're
very limited.
Talking about. And the other thing is, as soon as you set up more than 2 speakers, first of all, with 2 speakers, you got to sit right in one spot. But you can move a little bit front or backward. As soon as you add rear speakers or anything else, you're literally
yeah.
there. Because you move that and that, you just add other phase issues that
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to start a sort of range war here, but
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 that's
the source of that is always
No,
interesting.
I did
to
a
me because-
demonstration with my class on Tuesday. I set up a video system, and I very rarely do it at my shop, but we set it up a full 5.1 system, and I played just a video that was music. It was Roy Orbison. Nice video. You might have seen it with all the stars back.
Black and white?
Yeah, black and white. Great video. But I said, sit in the middle here where we calibrated the sound. And not that I sat there and got it microscopically right, but got it by ear right. And then I said, just move 2 feet to the side. And it's like, so you got one person. But that's fine if you only listen by yourself.
So just to summarize, then, there isn't right now a streaming environment for that.
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware.
So we're looking just at high-res, 2-channel.
You could always get a matrix system.
The only Tidal, as far as I know, is the only streaming service that offers CD quality streaming, and then they also offer MQA, which is with the proper decoder can go up to 24,384 when it's decoded.
So a couple points to your question. First, to augment the comments Rafe made. Tidal is in market with high-res streaming files from at least one major music company, Warner, with others presumably to follow. Back at CES, at least 3 or 4 other companies announced intention to enter the streaming space with high-res files. Sometime this spring, Napster Rhapsody will launch. They made a public commitment at the CES show discussing that. Other companies have expressed interest, Pandora, HD Tracks, and more. And it's still very early in the game on this. So it's important to look at the market, which is becoming very prominent or focused on streaming, and the amount of people in this space who are interested in expanding their offerings to this. The other question you raised before around surround, though, I think an important point to make. The oral cues that we respond and rely on to visual content, motion pictures, concert videos, are very different than the pure music space. And having been involved with multi-channel SACDs and DVD audios a few years back, it's a very different proposition, both in terms of recording them and marketing them. So it's, again, another point people take into account. The real question probably is, why the hell, with so many people fixated on the concert experience, have we been unable, as an industry, to market concert videos on any physical or digital platform, particularly Blu-rays and DVDs? So I'll leave it at that.
I have time for one more question from the audience. Anyone? You want to chime in? Bring a little quick up. There we are. Name? City? Blood type?
I'm Randy from Elmhurst. I got one pretty easy question for you guys probably, but it's going back to the mid-90s when they had CDs, they had gold mastered CDs, and I never noticed a quality difference in the sound of that. And was there really a difference, or was I just paying $10 more?
Well, supposedly they'll last 300 years. But supposedly they'll last 300 years, but who's gonna know that, right?
So there were issues related to everything debated from CD rot with current reflective coatings or other reflective coatings to, again, a more reliable, more evergreen product. But I think a lot of that was also market differentiation, which is very big in our industry. That little extra spice that gives a product a little different proposition to someone to buy. Needless to say, it's very rare to find those discs these days in the marketplace.
I would add this, and I actually use MoFi
Yes,
gold
you
discs.
do.
I bought some from them, and I used them quite a bit, because I was doing CDRs for a long time and producing some music. And on the recording end, recording analog tapes into CDR machines, I could take, a Taiuden or a metal, or a gold disc or whatever, and you could hear differences in them. And the gold discs, I think, at that point sounded a little bit better. And then there was, I can't remember the name of the company, came out with this disc that had the aerated back. What the hell are they called? I haven't worked with CDRs now in 8 years, so I'm sorry, my mind.
Right, but I think the question was more CD-ROM or replicated
Yes.
discs than CDR or
Right,
RW discs.
right, but I'm just
Right,
saying
right.
that I did hear a difference in that
Sure.
format. But playback, as far as
A replicated disc.
replicator, I can't answer that one honestly either, really.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being part of our audience. Enjoy the rest of AXPONA.